CIES webinar series. We will be today having the 10th edition of our webinar. I remember you that the CIES is an International Center for Sport Studies, and we are using this period to discuss through this webinar weekly crucial questions. And please don't forget to get in touch with us and subscribe, so you will have the possibility to see our program. In the case you are not able to see it, it's always possible to see later on YouTube. So today's theme is motorsports, driving through the crisis, and we have 4 guests coming from very different areas. So I will start with 4 former FIFA Master alumni, actually. So I will start with Ayan Aghayeva, who is the Deputy National Press Office Formula 1 and Broadcast Operation Manager at Azerbaijan Grand Prix, and she's an alumni from the FIFA Master 14th edition. Ayan, how are you?
Hi Pierre, hi everyone. Good to see you. Congratulations on 10th anniversary of this webinars. Just briefly about myself. I'm now joining from Baku, Azerbaijan. I'm 14th year graduate from FIFA Master Alumni. I've been working ever since graduation. I've been working for Formula 1 Azerbaijan from promoter side, from host side. It's been already 5 years. Also, I'm an associate teacher at local sports MBA in sports academy in Azerbaijan, and member of selection and admission board for the local sports MBA in here. So
great.
Nice
so we will see what the situation is in a few minutes in the various countries. Second speaker is Marianne Cornejo, who is working for International Sport 2-wheel at Red Bull, and she's a FIFA Master alumni from the year later, so 2015. Marianne is a triple citizen. She is Mexican, US American, and Spanish. Am I right?
Correct. Yes, and excellent pronunciation, Pierre.
Thank you very much. So, how are you, Marianne, and how is the situation at the moment?
Good, thank you. I am coming to you from Salzburg, Austria. Red Bull headquarters is here in Austria. And just to give a little background, like Ayan, I have been in the 2-wheel motorsport team for 3 seasons now. And so far we are weathering the storm.
Good. Our third speaker from London is Adam Crothers, head of digital media rights at Formula 1 and FIFA Master alumnus from 2011. Adam is a double citizen. He is Irish and Australian, and I know that you came back from Australia very recently. So how are you, Adam? And how is the situation?
I'm great. I'm really well, Pierre. Lovely to see you guys as well, Ayan and Marianne. Yeah, I mean, God, this is really strange times. So we're doing the best we can. Working from home is taking a bit of getting used to, but yeah, I think Ayan and Marianne, I think the respective countries you're in, you guys are back in the office now. Hopefully, we're not too far away. But yeah, it's. I'm excited about this chat now and open to discussing the great and the good of motorsport.
Great. So, and our last speaker, Konstanze Grammatikos, is a co-founder of CIES GmbH. It's a Swiss Formula E promoter. I mean, Konstanze is as well a double citizen. She's German and Greek, and she is from the 2012 edition of the FIFA Master.
Yeah, hello.
How are you, Konstanze?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Great.
Yes.
You're in Switzerland at the moment, are you?
I'm in Zurich. So yeah, and I'm part of the Swiss Prix organization, which is the Swiss promoter for the Formula E races here in Switzerland. Yeah, we have brought back motorsports back to Switzerland after more than 60 years, and 2 races have happened. Actually, the first one exactly 2 years ago today. And yeah, we're working or trying to get back another one in the next years.
Perfect. So before going to the debate, you explain. So I would like to express how specific the case of motorsports has been, because probably in the field of motorsports, that's the area of sports where we could say the situation is the most global worldwide. And this globality and this, the way it works, make it visible worldwide. Well, this is creating one of the key problems at the moment in motorsports. The fact that transport is difficult, the reality of the transportation and the use of international transport doesn't allow the competition to take place. Could you tell us a little bit what the situation is? I think I would start from this point of view, from the organizers. So I will ask Adam first. How is the situation for the Formula One from this point of view?
Yeah, it's been an unbelievably challenging couple of months for us, right across the board, commercially and then operationally. I heard various people high up in the organization, Ross Braun, really, who's our managing director of Motorsport, saying this is one of the most challenging times in his entire career, and this is a guy that's one of the most successful guys in motorsport. You're right, Pierre. I mean, the fabric of the sport is predicated on globality and traveling around the world and bringing the road show everywhere, right? So where Ayan is in Baku, making that trip logistically pre-COVID is a challenging thing to do. If you think about the size of the road show, when we're bringing teams and fans and personnel, it's a huge operation. And now the challenges we face now are sort of unprecedented. So, I mean, the positive news is, I mean, let's focus on the positive. That's the way I think we should be looking, is we're going back racing in a couple of weeks' time in Austria, where Marianne is. It's great. We're going to be 2 back-to-back races. And effectively what we've had to do is create a thing called a biosphere. I didn't even know what that was a couple of weeks ago, but a biosphere is effectively a closed-knit cell, right? So all of the teams will be very limited in terms of where they can go, who they can travel with. It's going to be, without fans, unfortunately, which is a great shame for sport. But I think right now the world needs some content. And we're happy to play our role in that. But I don't know. I mean, this is going to systematically change, I think, our outlook, even post-COVID. I think, will it severely impact our strategy going forward? Not just in the short term, but in the medium to long term. We definitely see ourselves a global sport. We travel to 22 different locations around the world. And if we're limited in doing that going forward, the fundamentals of our sport will probably change. And it's just a case of how we work through that. But this is probably the biggest challenge, Pierre, that you've outlined, is our worry that, as I said, the foundations of our sport are global, and that might come under direct challenge now.
Yes, one of the key elements. So somebody knows you, Konstanze. Have you just noticed on the screen? Some of the clear element is about the country where the next competition will take place. So I will ask Marianne to tell us a bit from the motorbikes reality, how this difficulty of transport and globality works. Then we will move to Ayan and Konstanze.
Yes, I think from our side, I mean, speaking specifically about Austria, we've been lucky that the situation here never got past a certain point, and so they locked down quite early, and it was a very thorough lockdown, and people were respecting the rules and such, so they were able to contain the situation, and hence they have been able to reopen quite quickly. We have been, as Adam said, in the office now for 4 weeks, and so for us here, we are more so looking into how we can make it a smooth arrival for all of the sporting events that are coming here. But more so looking at the entire season, same case as Adam, over 20 locations. And for us, the things that we took for granted before, of being able to travel and hop on a plane and roads and borders and everything was just a given. And races tend to come every year on a bit of a schedule. So we had our habits and we had everything timed down to perfection. And now everything has been thrown up in the air. So organizationally, it's a day-by-day case where we cannot plan ahead as we are accustomed to either, because we have to factor in all of the updates that are coming through from local governments.
It is absolutely, I don't know if I could use the word fascinating, but in a way it is, how you have to reinvent, particularly in the field of motorsports, that is by far the most globalized and world-oriented sport. You know, to have a world championship in motorsports, it's not that everybody goes to the same place, but the championship goes to everybody's place. What is very specific, and through the current situation, this is no more possible. Let's take the position of one of the places that that receives this world event. How do you deal with that at the moment, Ayan?
Well, actually, from promoters' perspective, keeping Formula One itself as a global brand is the most desired scenario. I think same is true for the Formula One, both Automobile Federation and F1 commercial side. So it's kind of collaboration between the two, how to keep this season going and how to keep it still global despite the challenges and mobility issues. And from promoter side, of course, hosting it is difficult as a city race. Actually, it was purposefully decided to have Baku City Circuit years ago as a city race to have more exposure to the fans. But having it as a city race, it's double difficult compared to purpose-built autodromes, because, you know, within the city, if you host such a major event, you are naturally more exposed to the kind of health issues and risks in this period. So the decision was to not to expose people to the risk. So there were different scenarios, having it with 0 spectators, just for sake of having a race, or hold it like a full-scale event as it was before, especially given the fact that this year it was supposed to be our 5th year, kind of small anniversary of having the race in Baku, and for Formula One it was 70th year anniversary. So we're still not unsure if we're gonna have it or not, but if we do, there's lots of considerations that we should consider. It's just a reduction for spectators.
I think we lost Ayan. Well, I think this
Considerations to keep.
Okay.
And also some sanitary rules that needs to be closely followed. Again, because
we lost Ayan. I'm sure she will be back. Konstanze, tell us a bit from the e-sport, from the Formula E and all the ecological as well distance. How is it going? How do you see these seasons and these global events? What is happening at the moment?
Well, where I am for the Swiss race, nothing is really happening because there's none scheduled. And to be honest, I'm quite glad at the moment, because this situation would have hit us enormously without an event which is happening in the city centers usually. Well, that's the idea. So the impact, I think, for Formula E in general is quite big, as you can't gather people. And although it's not part of their concept, the next races, so as far as I know, it's not officially announced that they're gonna start in August to finish the season. And these will be events without any audience. So they have to move from their concept, and the only location they're having where they can do is I think Berlin, because they are on a different ground at Tempelhof. So there they can organize not to have any people. Otherwise, it's totally out of their concept, because they go into the city centers to attract the audience and to go to the people.
Okay, well, before continuing, I would like to remember our viewers. If you have any question, please don't forget to post it, and we will tell it we'll ask a question to our 4 guests. Well, do you know the particularity? Well, you have some greetings from Singapore, from Biplav, former alumni from the FIFA Master, where they will still have their Grand Prix next year. So, Adam, you may meet Bip this year, and I would like to say hello to him as well. Well, one of the particularity of the motorsport is as well the direct link you get with innovation and technology. I mean, I will play my role as an historian and remember you that when the big 1973 crisis of oil came out, the industry of cars used the Formula One and used the various races to innovate as well in finding the possibilities to have competition with less consumptions, with better aerodynamics of the car, etc. That has an impact on the whole industry. But at the moment, one of the elements we see very, very evidently is the difficulty you are experiencing in the field of sports to deal with this particular world dimension. And this world dimension is as well connected to sponsored tourism and all the very agents that are close to it. What is your day? Have you time to sleep, Adam, at the moment? It must be a nightmare with all the demands to fulfill all the various actors. How do you manage that?
Yeah, it's a really complex landscape. I've worked at FIFA. I thought that was relatively complex. Then I came to the NBA. I thought that was complex, and then I came to Formula One, and that really educated me on what a complex commercial ecosystem looks like. To pick up on your point, Pierre, I think to borrow someone else's phrase, necessity being the mother of invention. This whole thing has effectively charged us to think differently. And not just us, it's sort of ignited a way for all of our partners to think differently, be that broadcast partners, sponsors, the promoters, so Ayan and her group, to figure out how we can keep the brand alive and keep people engaged whilst not having any racing. So, I know we may come onto it in more detail later on, but the whole virtual esports conversation picked up a huge amount our end as a result of this. We as a brand, I think the core focus for us has always been how do we engage with fans. We're no different to any other sport. That's at the very core of what we do. And if we don't have live racing, it's charged us a little bit differently about how we can create something that does engage fans. Archive content only goes so far. We're trying to look at ways that are novel, that is, as a brand, we're always trying to index with a younger audience. I think for a long time, Formula One was sort of, there was a shelf life, certainly when Liberty bought the business. And we're trying to look at, and this has given us an opportunity to maybe pivot away from being just a sports brand into more of an entertainment media asset. But yeah, I mean, we've had sponsors, we've had Heineken and Rolex come to us with really amazing, cool ideas about how they can leverage their participation and association with Formula One through these really testing times. But I wish I had the answer, because if I did, then I'd be a very rich man and I wouldn't be working at Formula One. There's no silver bullet to this. I think this is just completely, we never saw this coming. To have what is a year-long sport now condensed into 3 or 4 months and have 4 or 5 months of nothing has been a major challenge. And we're just trying to keep as many people happy as we can. I'll be really interested to hear actually this group's view on that, because I'm sort of closer. I sort of look at it through one dimension, but having Marianne and Ayan and Konstanze who look at it maybe from the outside in, it would be interesting to get their perspectives on maybe how we've dealt with that.
We would like to say his word. I mean, the order is how you prefer now. Who wants to answer? I think Ayan from that is probably the more direct.
Yeah, can I pick the question once again, as I had break? I had an internet outage.
No, was just to know how you see the fact for the city. What is the impact for the city, for the sponsors, for all the persons locally? How do you, from your side? I mean, Adam was saying the side of the organizers, but from your side.
I see. Well, for the last 5 years, we have like constant increase in terms of incoming tourists, especially by direct and indirect calculations. Of course, there was impact of F1 too, and it's obviously this year F1 Azerbaijan Grand Prix being postponed or not happening at all. We don't know yet. Is affecting the situation with tourism in the country. And also the fan base. We were like in the process of growing a young fan base locally by selling the Formula One as a luxurious festive kind of event in here. So of course this process slowed down with this pandemics kicking in, and maybe just this lockdown can take longer. We don't know. Yeah, but this definitely affects our branding, our top rating among other races, and the tourism in the country itself. And given that apart from tourism, we had many deals and pacts with local suppliers. Ever since I think year 2, we had been doing lots of optimization within the company and trying to extend our contracts with our suppliers up to 3 years, up to 4 years, so that just for sake of optimization and development. So now we have obligations before suppliers and our partners now. Sure. And yeah, so this is a like tough time, and we are still
complex, definitely.
Yeah. Definitely. So from one point, you just try to play smart and just to try to optimize, centralize the things, and just make it more like kind of settle down for the next. In total, we were supposed to hold it for 8 years, 5 years plus contract plus 3 years. In total, 8 years. So ever since year 2, we started to optimize this, prolong our contracts with our subcontractors. So now it means that we have obligations, and we still pay some operations which are not happening, and we still do the warehouse things and logistics. We have to pay the salaries for the core staff, permanent core staff who works for the circuit. So these are like unconsidered, unexpected costs that we face without making any profit, like making zero profit right now. But well, as said, bottom line, learning to drive through the crisis, and probably the Austrian case in terms of optimizations of the staff could be a good learning for our circuit. And also moving to this more to the digital in terms of keeping, maintaining, and growing fan base. It's also another learning curve for us as a promoter, as a circuit, because we have to do it, especially given the fact that for 3 years back to back we were in top 3 among among 21 countries. So we have to struggle and fight back our spot in calendar. So yeah.
Before I give the floor to Marianne, I wanted to go to the first question coming from one of our alumni who knows very well the sport, because he was working for one of the team. Marcelo Olkis from the 9th edition of the FIFA Master had a very specific question regarding the decision to keep the Australian Grand Prix, even with several COVID-19 cases already in Italy. It made all the F1 teams based in Europe traveling to Australia, and then cancelling on Friday some hours just only before the opening of the gates, with the spectators only in the line. How did it work? So Adam, can you tell us a bit more about that, and then we move to the others?
Yeah, that was a really difficult decision. I mean, maybe in hindsight you'd think it was a straightforward decision, but something that I didn't really touch on. We have a within the sort of complex ecosystem that's Formula One, and Ayan will be aware of this. We have state municipalities, we have mayors, we have governments, we have different levels of legislature that we sort of deal with to make a race happen, depending on the promoter in in each territory that we go to. So obviously in Australia, the Victorian government, as Ayan actually just perfectly alluded to there, right? It's not a little known fact that the promoters do pay us. There's a transactional relationship to have a Formula One race in each territory, and when they don't have the ability to refinance that through ticket sales and various other things, it's a major impact on one of our most important commercial limbs of the business. So we really wanted to give them every chance to make it happen. I think it was at the early stage of coronavirus when things were quite fluid and people were kind of trying to figure out what was possible and what wasn't. I think looking back, it doesn't look like a particularly pleasant picture, going that late. I think it's a really good question from Marcelo. I think there's a lot of learnings to be taken from it. And I think if we had the chance to, we probably would have done things differently. But we were just trying to give everyone within that. It's really difficult to keep everyone happy. And I think what we were trying to do is keep everyone happy down to the last minute. But that obviously affected teams and fans in quite a material way.
Yes, well, I get your point, and it's not specific to Formula One as well. As the relationship in the sporting institution and the policymaker has changed during that. At the time of it,
100%.
Worked for the Olympics, worked for when should that's on one way very interesting for us as academics to look at it from a perspective to understand the kind of interactions that should be developed for the future. Marianne, tell us, I live very close to the Mugello race course, just on outside my house. So, now we are early June. Notice that there are some motorbike on the weekend, but that's something else. So how do you deal with that? Because traveling, gathering for competition is something so important in the motorbike culture. How does it work without it?
Well, for us personally, I mean, even though MotoGP is an international project, we activate every race, even in the countries that have multiple. So for example, Italy or Spain, we activate it locally. So we work very closely with, for example, Red Bull Italy or Red Bull Spain. And then the guests, the activations, because when a GP comes to a location, it's not just the racetrack that we're focused on, it's everything. It's before, it's after, it's all of our consumer experiences. And so for us, we really had to go back to the drawing board to see how we can interact with our guests and with the fans, how we can function as a bridge to our athletes as well, to give them insights and more of the feeling of being involved if all the races are going to be spectator free. For us also, our partnerships, for example, have been the springboard from which we have been able to continue to plan and to weather this storm again. So it's really, we have seen an enormous return on the investment that we had made in terms of relationship building and fostering a strong partnership, and not just looking for sponsors, let's say, in the support that they have given us and the communication that we have been able to maintain in order to fortify the GP experience from their channels, from ours, and as a united effort.
Konstanze, any things to add on this from this point of view?
Yes, like for example, I mean, I already said we had no obligations, but for Formula E, I think which is quite good in this case is that most of the races are organized by Formula E themselves. Like they don't have many promoter races. Like we are only of very few, so for them it was quite easy, or the decision was taken quite fast to stop this season, and they already had like 5 races. I think they started earlier. So I think in that perspective, the impact for sure for everyone is bad for the entire industry, like not to have any events and everyone who's involved, because the supply chain is really, really long. And but in that perspective, like how they're set up with being organizers themselves, I think helped in this case.
Mm-hmm. Do you know, I think this crisis may be, in my view, the opportunity to change something. One of the key problems of the motorsports is a gender orientation of the sport. I mean, we see that well, the pilots are almost exclusively male. When we prepared this webinar, we discussed about the fact that a very little part of the actors are women, and the position given to women are generally very specialized. I mean, Christina Frestorff, who helped us to prepare it, just told me that in the motorsport industry, the position of women have evolved. They are more involved in it, but in the marketing, in the communication, or in the hospitality, very difficult to have them racing or leading some of the teams. Don't you think that it is a moment to reflect? We have more time now. And give women a little bit more power. I'm very pleased to have 3 women present there, but I don't want to have a male focused discussion style. So I don't know who wants to begin, but I think that's one of the key issues motorsports have to start with. We like a global sport, great, but we need people from everywhere and coming from the different backgrounds. We want to start.
I think I could start, since I work with a junior development program. So we start with our younger riders. And I think that is really where the problem begins, because we have, for example, our selection event to foster talent that will ultimately become the world champions of tomorrow. And they come to us when they're 12 to 13 years old, typically. And by the time they get there, only 3% of the riders are female. So that means that by 12 or 13 years old, they have already experienced such significant gender differences in terms of access, encouragement, supports, investments, that it only gets worse as you get older. So by 12, it's only 3% of pilots are female or are looking to continue in a serious professional direction. I think, to me, that indicates a big problem at home or also in the younger ages. The support we give to children, basically.
I always have this problem with my microphone. Who wants to continue?
I would like to continue, because I think Formula E is quite advanced in that sense. Like they started, I mean, it's a quite young season. They started in 2014, 15, 14. Anyway, they had 2 women starting in the first season, and they had another one, a Swiss racer, actually, Simona De Silvestro, who participated or drove an entire season. So they have women in the teams. And for example, Simona now is test and development driver for the Formula E, for the Porsche family and in Formula E, and they do events where they support the women to get more track time, because somehow all the drivers need track time, and they support the women in that sense. And also, besides the female drivers who are involved there, they also have a team where the woman is the team principal. It's Susie Wolf. She's a former Formula 1 driver, and she's running the Venturi team. And they have also, which is quite a nice initiative by FIA, it's called Dare to Be Different, Girls on Track, where they invite girls from the age 8 to 18 at the events to explore more about the industry. And they do workshops, and it's a great program to get the girls interested in the motorsport and also in all the STEM topics as well. So this is actually quite nice.
But am I right when I say that the W Series for 2020 has been cancelled for this year, unfortunately? So that the women's only races will not take place. So that's not a good signal.
Yeah, no, it's not a good signal at all. It's a great shame, and some great points already made by the group here. I think I just want to touch on Marianne's point, because I couldn't agree more. Like, when it comes to diversity, whatever the diversity is, you always look at the barrier to entry, right? So why is there a diversity problem? And I think for Formula One, we've recognized for the last number of years, that there is a diversity problem internally and externally, and that's something we're looking to address. And I think for me, it's often said, but it does all start with schools. We have a STEM program, Formula One in schools, that we've been promoting quite heavily, certainly since Liberty acquired the company 3 years ago, to systematically change the understanding of what Formula One is. So if ethnic backgrounds or even women, if they don't understand how the sport works, because I guess motorsport is inherently a male thing, you've got that petrol head, sort of the notion of that stigma sticks quite closely to men. And, if we can go about educating younger people, females, that there is a route in here, and there's many other challenges, right? It's a costly sport. It's not a pick up and play like many other sports. Then I think there's a path, but you're absolutely right. There is a major problem, and you have to admit it. You can't just talk around it, and it's something we need to address. And I think it starts with grassroots. And you're right, Pierre, to pick up on your question, the W Series being cancelled is a massive dent in that, because we've got 18 female drivers from 12 different countries racing in 8 different territories around the world. That is a global sport, and when we can't put it on, it's a big vacuum.
Yes, may I add something? Sorry. It's like motorsports is the only sport where men and women compete as equal. So if it's for sure, it's like for
equestrian as well.
Sorry?
Equestrian as well.
Yeah. It's not the only one. It's one of few sports where men and women compete as equal. So actually, you would want to see men and women compete in the same competition and not just a separate competition. And this is what, for example, Formula E allows. And next year, there's Extreme E starting as a road full electric series, where the teams are made of a man and a woman, and they also have to swap, as far as I know, during the races, each lap. So this is something where you actually have a mixed starter lineup and of teams with both genders. And I think this is where it should go to, and not necessarily have a separate series.
We
yeah,
see
I
this,
agree.
Yes.
That has been the case also with Moto E. For example, Maria Herrera has been racing in Moto E alongside the men. And I think anytime that we have seen, even throughout history, separate but equal, it's not equal. And so I think finding the way to merge together is definitely to the sport's advantage.
Great. And motorsports is so important from this point of view. Ayan, please.
Yeah, just adding a few perspectives from promoters' point of view in this diversity issue in motorsports. Of course, by pitching and by pitching for F1 in Azerbaijan and bringing the sports to Azerbaijan. But one of the purposes, of course, was to put the country into map. But another thing was just to grow the fan base and racer space around the world together with F1. And probably it will be our success story to mention that over the 5 years, we had 2 bright stars, newly emerging racers having Azerbaijani nationality in Azerbaijan, but they were only male, and it was already a success for us, because for just like such a young country joining the motorsport, it was already kind of a success. But in terms of gender diversity, I think for us the main achievements were having more female involved in management, in delivery of the race, and the motorsport itself, having more female coming as a marshals in terms of putting the race together, or growing the female fan base. And actually we have observed that in most of the cases, racers sometimes come out from the fan base as well. So through growing the fan base in the country, motorsport fan base, creating the trend, we are really considering
to have more racers, maybe potentially female racers in coming years. But for this, we also need to build an autodrome, which is not the case yet. We are having only city circuit. So probably having autodrome, growing fan base, having more experts, and also involving big players could help to diversify the gender thing in motorsports. Like when I say big players, I mean Big Four. They are always involved in kind of increasing developing the gender diversity in every field, including sport. By telling big players, I mean international governing bodies. I mean local agents like promoters. I mean private companies. So well, it's kind of mix and combination of the efforts from all of the sides, but definitely the COVID-19 period could be a good time to think of it and to come up with more working solutions. Yeah.
Great, and it's perfect. It will create an ideal transition to the question Kaspar Yangali on YouTube asked, and he said, "I'm in football, and I like this discussion. What lessons in the midst of this crisis can other sporting disciplines learn from motorsports?" A lot of it. Please.
Well, then I start. I think it shows you have to be, first of all, very adaptive. Also for new technologies, like you see Formula 1 and Formula E, both reacted really quickly and set up like an esports challenge. So that is one thing. You have to be prepared and not just last minute, like you need a plan B before if things like this happen. And another one I'd like to mention is like now we see the world slow down and also nature recovered. And I think you need a message, and Formula E's message is for cleaner resources and renewable energies, to have a sustainable mobility. And I think this shows now while all the traffic has stopped, like the sky clears and all these things happening now shows like the mindset needs to change in the whole mobility and transportation sector. And I think Formula E is really good in this with their message. And I think it shows to all other sports, because sports has the power to drive change, that they should have a message for their fans. And I think that would be, I think it's a good time, and it shows that you can only survive if you have a purpose.
Yeah, but is it not a certain form of challenge between esports and Formula E? That's you know, that where to find the right balance between opposition and working together. It's not so simple. We may come to it later.
Yeah, but I mean, for Formula E, it has already been incorporated. Like esports is part of their concept. Like at their events in their fan zone, it's called eVillage. They have a booth, and it's really popular. There's always a really, really huge long queue where they can qualify to play or race against one of the 4 drivers who come during the event. So it was always part. And all the digital aspects as well, they've been already incorporated, like the interaction with fans, with the fan boost. And now they incorporated the attack mode, which is like an element coming from gaming. Like you have like Super Mario Kart, something where you have to get off the perfect racing line. You get off that and you can gain extra power. So they've already had this as part of their DNA, and the now Race at Home challenge, which they have started, which is finished now during this COVID quarantine time. Well, it was set up quite quickly because they have always invested in that area.
Yeah.
For me,
we have quite a lot of other questions. Marianne, please, and then I move to the next question because we have a lot. Please, Marianne.
Okay, for me, just quickly, I came from football before coming to motorsports, and something that I noticed even before my personal experience before Corona, but even more so during and after, is the attitude of our biggest stars. The openness and spirit of cooperation and the approachability is something that I rarely have seen in football. I think the mentality is very important, and I can't generalize to Formula One or Formula E, but at least in MotoGP, I know that this is the case. That the sense of cooperation and passion for the sport itself and the fan base is very strong.
Yeah, one question from another alumni, Lena Schöpf, who works in the industry, and she's asking how to keep the teams, promoters, and Formula One, their partners, sponsorship alive. What activations are they doing instead of live racing? Can you tell us a little bit more about the other activities the big circus is developing when the circus can't work?
Yeah, and that's again part of the sleepless nights that some of the people have at Formula One right now. When you have commercial partners, so people like Ayan, you've got the people at the very top end of the spectrum at Heineken and Rolex and Emirates and DHL and Pirelli and Saudi Aramco, our main partners. You've got teams and drivers. You've got teams and driver sponsors. It's a web of commercial activity when live racing is on, and when live racing isn't on, there's a massive vacuum that you can almost hear a pin drop. We've been, so as I said at the top, Heineken, on the content side, which is sort of the side I sit on, looking after media distribution, we've really been focusing on leveraging our assets through social. I think we've seen, the main social platforms have never seen so much traffic over the last 3 or 4 months as they ever have been, nor will they ever do, given the lack of content through traditional media. So we've been trying to leverage our association with those partners through our social content, through branded content ideas. But, if I'm honest, and I have to be, that's nothing in comparison to, the eyeballs. We have over 30 million people tune in around the world for each race. So, as much as we'd like to say that the virtual Grand Prix is a great initiative, and it is, there's only so much that that the teams and drivers and their sponsors can actually leverage through it. But we're no different, right? This is why it's a great discussion. We're no different to any other. You could ask the same question to the NBA, to the NFL. Marianne, for example, is a perfect case in point here, being on the brand side. And Ayan, it's a challenge, and it's incumbent on us as a rights holder who have these commercial arrangements in place to try and think as creatively as we can during the downturn, and just pray to God that the racing comes back on quickly before they start knocking on our door and saying we want money back. So yeah, that's really where we're at right now.
Yeah, and I think we need to move to the many questions we have regarding one of the key issues, which is the question of the virtual Grand Prix. I mean, Maza Ahmed was asking, we saw the virtual Grand Prix create a lot of interest and was a lot of fun for the fans. Do you see an opportunity to expose a more human side of the driver this way?
Do you want me to take that one?
I think the question refers to Formula One, but okay, I'll just go quickly. I mean, for MotoGP, so there were 10 races total, virtual races during the Corona period, and the videos had 52 million views, of which 12 million were live. So it is something that we're seeing. Something that I personally really enjoyed from watching these races is that you got to see the personality of the riders as they're playing and they're talking amongst them. You see more of a behind the scenes, unfiltered access, and so I do think that there is, for sure, this is something that Red Bull has been partnering with for years, and something that we will continue to do moving forward. But as Adam also said, I think nothing can replace the real thing.
Yeah, quickly from the Formula One perspective, as I said, it's been a great initiative, but it's as I said to you guys when we were chatting earlier on, that in the land of the midgets, the smallest man is king. It's a nice initiative. It keeps people happy. It gives us an opportunity to engage with fans when racing isn't on. But it's you know, if we're being brutally transparent, it's you know, our sponsors and the drivers who have taken part in it have loved it, but it's certainly, you know, we need to get the main product back on stage. I will say that, you know, the question posed is what I take from that, and Marianne, again, I probably from the motorbike perspective, the issue we have is the fact that drivers are in a car for an hour and a half and they've got their visor down, so we can't see their emotion, we can't see them. Very seldom do we actually get to see the human side of these guys until really until after the race. So we're trying to, you know, from the original content, we released that Netflix series Drive to Survive, which we believe has shown another side of our sport, that these guys are human, that they have emotions, they have feelings, that they have frustrations, and how they wear that is important, and we have to tell that story. You know, the virtual is one element of it, but there's loads more we can do, because these guys, they're fascinating characters. You've got to be a little bit crazy to get into one of these cars or into one of these bikes.
One of the problems we may imagine is that not every driver wants to be e-driver on his just having a race which is a simulation. One of the difficulties of this development of esports with the motorsports is mixing one with the other, the virtual and the real, and how the virtual may completely put the real sport aside, and people there has been a specific problems happening with it in Formula E recently, and one of the major difficulties is to have you know, I know it from football. Players, when they score a goal, to watch their goal, how it is on the FIFA game or on the manager game. They prefer the goals that are virtual than the real ones, and they often cannot make the difference between both. This is creating a certain degree of problematics, and I guess that at the moment, that's where we have to sit down and imagine the role between the real and the potential elements. But it's very interesting to see how much the industry works together in the field. Cars, you are dealing with a very important car industry, which is clearly experiencing a difficulty, while you are working as well with the top technology industry, anyway, to be on the top. So I think, as the question said earlier, there is a lot to learn probably from the situation in your sports, as in the possibilities. I know, Ayan, you had something to say on that.
Yeah, in this regard, I mean, from our observation, I mean, from years of working with drivers and teams, not only their online virtual participation, but their even physical participation used to be an issue. I think that's one of the reasons that when the calendar of the F1 was expanded beyond 20 races, there came discussions of reducing the race weekend from 4 days to 3 days, because drivers was physically exhausted, and they were just suggesting have a race weekend shorter so that they can travel to all of the countries. So that dispute was even before esports came into play, and before the expectations started to rise towards the drivers. And then, of course, with this esports coming into play, of course, it is very typical to drivers to be a party spoiler, not to be available or not to support this. But on the other hand, it's a growing trend that their virtual presence is kind of key for the survival of the sport, or for the survival of the team. So to my understanding, it's just more like a team and driver relationship management, how to make it possible, how to make it work, and how to sustain this visibility in virtual by the drivers. And similar thoughts we also think and experience as circus. We also try to stay on surface, stay afloat by promoting the virtual racing on the race. As a city race, we try to promote the applications for racing, and so just to stay afloat. So I think it's just like a survival thing, that either you take it or you you are pushed away from the scheme. So
I get that. We have two more questions I would like to ask you from one of our past student and one from our future student from the FIFA Master. I will start with the past one and finish with the future one. Pierre Mackenzie from the 17th edition, she asked a question to everyone, and she said, how, and if so, would you adjust the preparation of the next race given the issue that has happened? So how would you adjust the preparation based on what has happened?
I guess I can go first. From our side, firstly, it is complying with the regulations that have been set forth by the local government. So it's not so much just us freely deciding. It's working very closely in collaboration with the local governments or the impacted governments, I should say. And then from there, there has been a huge focus on efficiency, of course, in order to reduce the risk. It's really justifying who is there and why and how. And so I think those two things of cooperation and efficiency are two factors that should be a part of our planning from here on out. And Corona has given us an opportunity to reevaluate how we do things year to year. And there are opportunities that lie in that.
Anyone want to add anything on that?
Very quickly, just a quick point. You know, we're bringing in a new cost-cutting measure in 2021, and this has actually been the impetus to bring that forward, right? We understand that everyone needs to shave off significant fat, and you know, I mentioned at the beginning there's going to be a biosphere. Normally 300 people would travel with each team to each Grand Prix. Now it's going to be 80. So you're looking at 3,000 versus 800, which is a massive drop, and that might be something that we look to roll out further. So yeah.
Absolutely. Well, quickly, because there is two more questions, and I like to be quick. So Stanislav Stipkov, we will be students of the 21st edition of the FIFA Master. And Stanislav asked, hello, how the FIFA F1 organizers deal with tickets refunds? And are the ticket holders protected by general legislation of every local organizer? Or does the local organizer decide by themselves based on the local law? Is there any decision on that, or?
I think I'll pick on that question. Yeah, as an organizer, of course, like in the basic level, of course, it's regulated by the ticket sales and by the disclaimer notice, which is mentioned in the tickets, that in terms of postponement or cancellation of the race, tickets are refunded. This, if we're talking about legislation or contract, it is already there in basic level. But other than that, of course, we still, but for the moment, we don't know if there will be a race for 2020 for our race or not. But we will be strongly, we still, ever since there was a news that Azerbaijan race will be postponed for the year, I mean for 2020, and the June race will not happen, but it might happen over the year, over the season. So we kept the ticket refunds open, but we strongly encourage the ticket holders just to wait until what happens by the end of the season, if the race happens at all or not. But still, we were providing the refunds. And of course, the fan loyalty is a key for us as a promoter, as one of the 20, I think now 22 hosts in F1. So we try to keep like fan and promoter relationship healthy. So yeah. With or without legislation, we would refund it. But in terms of legislation, it is, I think, regulated by the disclaimer notice on the ticket against disasters or emergencies and everything.
So last one, because it's another alumni that asked one very quickly, and it's Nickel Moore from the 11th edition. And Nickel was asking, was saying, well, great that the motorsports industry has defined diversity as a shortcoming to solve. How does the industry proactively recruit professionals for their organizations? particularly for ethnic and racial diversity? What program has been put in place? If I can add on that, is not Hamilton seen as you know, as Tiger Woods for golf, as just the examples that would have solved all questions that is much more complex?
Yeah, I'm happy to take it initially, and I know this affects everyone on this call. You know, as I said, diversity across the board has been a major issue that we've decided, well, that we've realized is, and it's incumbent on us to change. I think, you know, the way Hamilton has spoken out over the last 10 days has been amazing, not only for our sport, but for all sport, and for society in general. It shouldn't just be, this shouldn't be a motorsport question. This should be how we look at ourselves and how we, you know, how we look at hiring principles, and how, you know, it's not just, we shouldn't just be looking at things like gender pay gaps and the number of, you know, the diverse nature of, or the breakdown, let's say, of demographics. It really should be, how do we open up our sport and make it far more, engender ourselves to be able to join and participate at all levels, including within the organization. I don't want to hide behind this STEM education thing that we have, but that for me, that's one way, right, of working in schools, which we are working in inner city schools all over the world, where, let's say, the ethnicity or the makeup of each school might have a more, you know, ethnic background than perhaps some of the more private schools that have been traditional feeders into Formula One, certainly in the UK. But, you know, this is something that we need to get better at. I will say that, and something that I think, you know, it's a great question from Nikhil, and I wish I had the perfect answer or the silver bullet, but I you know, I don't think there is one right now, but we have to get better at it.
And the last one is from Yarana Akhmedova, who is responsible of the circuit as well in Baku, and she said, "Well, how do you motivate your team after COVID-19? Negative implication on your daily operations." So, well, that's a simple one to finish with, you know. Any tips how to motivate the teams?
Well, being the counterpart of Irana, I think I can share my thought with her later, but I would really like to hear from my colleagues, from Adam, from Marianne, and Konstanze on this regard. But thank you for picking up the question.
Konstanze, what would you say on that? How do you motivate your teams?
Sorry. Well, I think there's a silver lining, and everyone is excited to go back and track. I mean, everyone is working and being very creative, and I think it was the time for, or it is still the time for, innovations and being creative. And I think it just showed it's time for a change, and I think that motivates the people if you show them the opportunities. I mean, there are also opportunities in this crisis. So I think that is a motivation. And in the sports, as far as I know, from what I've heard, everyone is really excited to go back, of course, because live events, you can't replace it. It's a unique experience. And especially the drivers, they want to drive. And there's just a difference for live events in general. And well, we hope we can all start soon and gather again. And that's, I think
for us, it was very motivating for us as a team to have the opportunity to talk about the issue at hand, to go beyond just the professional confines of our work, and to talk about this topic, which was then Corona, and is now, going back to Nikhil's question, is now the matter of Black Lives Matter and diversity overall, to have an open forum where you can discuss this and find a way where our values, our personal life lessons that we're learning in this moment of reckoning, that we have a space where we can bring it into our professional world as well.
Great. I think we have to conclude. An hour has just gone. It was great. I really enjoyed it. I would like to thank you all, because we touched, we went a bit beyond what is normally said in such debates, and you were all very, very active, and our listeners were as well. I would like to introduce next week's one, which is very connected to the last part of our discussion. Our webinar next Wednesday will be on esport and sport, a complex dialogue, as we just saw it today. And don't forget to to register if you like, and everything. And Marianne, Adam, Ayan, and Konstanze, thank you again. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you.
Bye.